Marcus Wilson, 37 years old, and I dedicated 15 years of my life to my father's plumbing business. I learned every pipe, valve, and fixture. I built relationships with our customers and helped grow the company into what it became. I always thought my hard work would pay off when Dad retired. Then he handed the keys to my younger brother Kevin, who spent 4 years in college and 2 years in the business. If you want to know how I built my own successful company while watching my father's business crumble, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to see how this story unfolds. My father, Frank Wilson, started Wilson Plumbing Services with nothing but a second-hand truck, a toolbox, and determination. I remember watching him leave before sunrise and return after dark coveralls stained with work hands rough from labor. Despite the long hours, he always had a satisfied look on his face. There's honor in fixing what others cannot, he would tell me. People depend on us. As a child, I would sit at the kitchen table while Dad explained how water systems worked, drawing diagrams on napkins. I was fascinated by the practical, puzzle-solving nature of his work. While other kids wanted to be astronauts or firefighters, I dreamed of working alongside my father. At 14, I started helping around his shop after school. My responsibilities were simple at first: sweeping floors, organizing inventory, cleaning tools. I absorbed everything I could, watching how the senior plumbers diagnosed problems and implemented solutions. By 16, I was accompanying Dad on service calls, handing him tools and learning the trade firsthand. When high school graduation approached, my teachers encouraged me to apply to colleges. I had decent grades and could have pursued engineering or business. But my mind was made up. I wanted to join the family business full-time. My father never pressured me either way, but I could see the pride in his eyes when I told him my decision. College isn't for everyone, he said. I built this business without a degree. What matters is your work ethic and willingness to learn. From day one, as a full-time employee, I committed myself completely. I arrived first, left last, and volunteered for the toughest jobs. I started as an apprentice, earning certifications through technical courses at the local trade school at night. By 23, I was a licensed plumber, handling my own service calls. The learning curve was steep, but I loved solving problems. Each house presented unique challenges: corroded pipes in older homes, improperly installed fixtures, mysterious leaks that seemed to appear from nowhere. I became known for tackling the jobs other plumbers found too difficult or time-consuming. Send Marcus customers would request. He figured out that issue no one else could solve. I built relationships with our clients, remembering details about their homes and families. Mrs. Jenkins, with her collection of ceramic cats that made accessing her sink difficult. The Sullivan family with their historic homes, temperamental plumbing. The Greenfield restaurant with late-night emergency calls that required immediate attention. During this time, my younger brother Kevin showed zero interest in plumbing. 6 years my junior, he was focused on sports friends and maintaining his social status. When Dad asked if he wanted to learn the business, Kevin would wrinkle his nose. "No thanks," he'd say. "I don't want to spend my life crawling under houses and dealing with toilets." Dad never pushed him, accepting that Kevin had different aspirations. In his senior year of high school, Kevin announced he wanted to attend Westridge University for a business degree. My parents beamed with pride at having their first family member attend college. "Your brother is taking a different path," Mom explained when she saw my expression. "That doesn't diminish what you're doing." But I noticed how they showcased Kevin's acceptance letter, how relatives were told about his college plans at every family gathering. Meanwhile, my promotion to service manager after 8 years with the company was mentioned in passing, if at all. Still, I remained focused on the business. As we entered the digital age, I recognized the need to modernize. I researched and implemented scheduling software that optimized our service routes. I digitized our invoicing system, making it easier to track payments and manage accounts. I created our first company website, bringing in new customers who found us online. The business grew steadily. We expanded from 3 service vehicles to 7. Our client list doubled, then tripled. I hired and trained new plumbers, passing along the knowledge Dad had shared with me, plus new techniques I'd learned along the way. Through all this, I operated with the understanding that one day the business would be mine to run. Dad never stated it explicitly, but it seemed logical. I had invested my adult life in Wilson Plumbing Services. I knew every aspect of the operation, from the technical work to customer service to the business side. I had helped transform it from a small operation into a respected company serving 3 counties. Meanwhile, Kevin went off to college, returning for holidays with stories of fraternity parties and business theory classes. Dad listened intently to these tales, fascinated by a world he had never experienced himself. I didn't begrudge their conversations, understanding this was something special they shared. "Your brother is getting the education I never had the chance to get," Dad told me once. "But you and we learned in the real world. That's valuable too." I believed him when he said that. I believed my dedication, practical knowledge, and proven results would speak for themselves when the time came. How wrong I was. Kevin returned home 4 years later with a business degree from Westridge University, complete with honors cords and a graduation ceremony, where our parents beamed with pride. I attended, too genuinely happy for my brother's achievement. Education was never my path, but I respected that he had completed what he set out to do. The change in our family dynamic became apparent immediately. The day after the graduation party, Dad hung Kevin's diploma in a prominent position in the main office. It was framed in expensive mahogany, positioned directly behind Dad's desk, where every customer and employee would see it. My master plumber license and contractor certifications, achievements that took years of practical experience and study, remained in their simple frames on the side wall of the hallway leading to the restrooms. "We've got a college graduate in the family business now," Dad would tell customers proudly. "Kevin's going to help us modernize and expand." Kevin had originally planned to pursue a corporate job in the city, but after several interviews yielded no immediate offers, he suggested he might help out with the family business until something better came along. Dad was thrilled, immediately creating a position for him, business development manager. "What exactly will he be developing?" I asked, during a rare moment alone with Dad. "The future Marcus," Dad replied, clapping me on the shoulder. "He's got fresh ideas from his professors, things we never would have thought of." Those fresh ideas began rolling out immediately. Kevin's first week, he presented a 50-page business strategy document full of MBA buzzwords and colorful charts. Dad sat through the entire presentation, nodding thoughtfully, though I knew half the terminology was as foreign to him as it was to me. "We need to pivot toward service diversification while leveraging our existing client infrastructure," Kevin explained, using the laser pointer he had purchased specifically for these presentations. When translated into practical terms, Kevin wanted to raise our service rates by 30% across the board, introduce tiered service packages, and expand into home renovation despite our lack of expertise in that area. "These are the strategies the major national chains use," Kevin insisted when I raised concerns. "They teach this approach at Westridge for a reason." What Kevin failed to understand was that our business wasn't a national chain. We were a local service provider whose reputation was built on fair pricing and quality work. The customers weren't nameless data points on his charts. They were people I had built relationships with over 15 years. Nevertheless, Dad gave Kevin the authority to implement changes. Our straightforward pricing structure was replaced with a complicated tiered system that confused longtime customers. Premium rates were charged for services we had previously included, at no extra cost. The new glossy brochures Kevin ordered featured stock photos of models in clean uniforms rather than pictures of our actual team. "Mrs. Abernathy called," I told Kevin after the new pricing went into effect. "She's been with us for 12 years, but says she can't afford the new service package. Can we make an exception?" "No exceptions," Kevin replied without looking up from his laptop. "Customer sentiment always dips during strategic repositioning. The market will adjust." The market didn't adjust. It rebelled. Customers who had trusted us for years began calling to complain, or worse, simply took their business elsewhere without a word. Our appointment calendar, once filled weeks in advance, now had noticeable gaps. I tried to address these issues with Dad during our weekly management meeting, bringing printed evidence of declining service calls and customer feedback. "It's just a transition period," Dad said dismissively. "Kevin says this is normal when implementing modern business practices. But we're losing customers who have been with us for over a decade," I pressed. Kevin interjected. Those customers were actually costing us money based on my analysis. Their price-to-service ratio was suboptimal. I stared at him in disbelief. Those suboptimal customers referred half our new business last year. Word of mouth is an outdated marketing channel, Kevin replied. We're investing in digital engagement and brand positioning now. The investment Kevin referred to was an expensive website redesign and social media campaign that showcased luxury bathrooms far beyond what our typical customers could afford. The disconnect between our actual service and Kevin's vision was growing by the day. One evening I stopped by Dad's house to drop off some paperwork and overheard him on the phone in his study. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but his words stopped me in my tracks. Bill, you should see how Kevin's transforming the business, Dad was saying to his old friend. I never imagined Wilson Plumbing would have such a professional operation. This is exactly why I wanted him to get that degree. He's going to elevate everything to a whole new level when he takes over. I stood frozen in the hallway, the implications of his words sinking in. When he takes over, not if. When. Dad had already decided the future of the company, and it didn't include me at the helm, despite my 15 years of service. I left without delivering the paperwork, driving around aimlessly for hours trying to process what I'd heard. Had this been the plan all along? Was my decade and a half of dedication merely marking time until Kevin was ready to step in? The tension between Kevin and me grew more noticeable around the office. The employees, many of whom I had personally hired and trained, were caught in the middle. They would come to me with practical concerns, scheduling issues, parts inventory, difficult technical problems, but were required to implement Kevin's new procedures that often complicated their work. Marcus, your team needs to embrace innovation, Kevin announced during a staff meeting after several employees questioned the new service protocols. Your resistance to change is creating a negative culture. My team, I repeated slowly, consists of experienced professionals who understand what works in the field. Maybe if you spent some time on service calls instead of behind that desk, you'd understand their concerns. The room went silent. I had never publicly challenged Kevin before. Dad cleared his throat. Let's take a break, shall we, Marcus? I'd like a word in my office. Behind closed doors, Dad's expression was stern. You need to support your brother, not undermine him. He's trying to help the business. Help it how revenue is down 15% since he implemented his changes. That's temporary. Growing pains. Kevin explained it all to me. Did he explain that the Carter contract, our biggest commercial client, is considering not renewing because they're unhappy with the new service structure? Dad waved his hand dismissively. Kevin's already working on bigger commercial accounts. He has contacts from college who run major property management firms. Those contacts never materialized into actual clients, but Dad's faith in Kevin remained unshaken. Meanwhile, I watched the business I had helped build for 15 years begin to show cracks in its foundation, powerless to make the changes needed to shore it up. The announcement came during what I thought would be a routine family dinner. Mom had prepared Dad's favorite pot roast, and Kevin had brought an expensive bottle of wine. I should have recognized the signs of a planned occasion, but I was preoccupied with a major plumbing emergency we'd handled that afternoon at the Westside Hospital. We were midway through dessert when Dad tapped his glass with his spoon, drawing our attention. His expression was solemn yet pleased, like someone about to share long-anticipated news. I have an important announcement, he began. After 35 years of running Wilson Plumbing Services, I've decided it's time for me to retire. This wasn't entirely surprising. Dad had hinted at retirement for the past year, mentioning fishing trips and the RV he and Mom had their eye on. I felt a momentary surge of anticipation mixed with apprehension. This was the moment I had been working toward for 15 years. As you know, Dad continued, a business is only as good as its leadership. Wilson Plumbing has been my life's work, and ensuring its continued success is my primary concern. He looked between Kevin and me, and I noticed Kevin was smiling confidently. A knot formed in my stomach. After careful consideration, I've decided that Kevin will take over as CEO of Wilson Plumbing Services effective next month. The room seemed to tilt around me. I heard my mother's delighted gasp, and Kevin's practiced acceptance speech as if from underwater. 2 years. Kevin had been with the company for just 2 years, most of that time spent implementing changes that had cost us customers and revenue. And now he would be in charge. Marcus will continue in his role as service manager. Of course, Dad added almost as an afterthought. His experience in the field will complement Kevin's business acumen. I felt every eye on me waiting for my reaction. With tremendous effort, I managed to keep my expression neutral and my voice steady. "Congratulations, Kevin," I said, raising my water glass in a toast I hoped didn't appear as hollow as it felt. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Extended family arrived for an impromptu celebration. Uncle Robert clapped Kevin on the back, saying how proud he was that a Wilson had finally made it to the executive level. Aunt Susan asked about Kevin's vision for the company while I stood in the corner nursing a drink and watching 15 years of my life being casually dismissed. Later, as guests were leaving, I found Dad alone in his study looking at old photos of the business. "Can we talk about this?" I asked, closing the door behind me. Dad sighed, appearing suddenly tired. "I know you're disappointed, Marcus. Disappointed doesn't begin to cover it. Dad, I've given everything to this company. 15 years. I know every customer, every employee, every aspect of the operation. And that's valuable," he said. "That's why Kevin will need you to continue managing the service side. But I've been running more than just service. I've been handling operations, customer relations, training, inventory, practically everything except the accounting." Dad shook his head. "The business world is changing, son. We need someone with formal education to navigate modern markets. Kevin understands business strategy, digital marketing, corporate finance things. Neither you nor I learned in the field. Those things can be taught or hired for," I countered. "What can't be taught is 15 years of industry experience and customer relationships." "Marcus," Dad said with unexpected firmness, "my decision is final. Kevin has the education this company needs to grow beyond what you or I could achieve with our limited backgrounds." The words hit like a physical blow. Limited backgrounds. After all these years, Dad still saw my practical knowledge that had built his company into what it was today, as somehow inferior to Kevin's 4 years of theory. "So my years of service count for nothing compared to his degree." "That's not what I'm saying," Dad replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Kevin will value your input. You'll still be an important part of the company. As a subordinate to my younger brother who knows nothing about the actual work we do." Dad's expression hardened. "I expected more maturity from you, Marcus. This isn't about sibling rivalry. It's about what's best for Wilson Plumbing." I left without another word, driving home through streets I had serviced for years. Every neighborhood contained memories. The Jones family, whose basement I had waterproofed during the flood of 2013. The elementary school where I had volunteered to fix their bathrooms when their budget was cut. The Richardson property where I had solved a complex plumbing issue that 3 other companies had failed to diagnose. All that knowledge, all those relationships, deemed less valuable than a framed piece of paper from Westridge University. I barely slept that night, replaying the dinner announcement and my conversation with Dad over and over. By morning, I had resolved to try making the situation work. For the sake of the business, for the employees who depended on their jobs, and for my own financial security, I would attempt to support Kevin's leadership while hoping he would recognize the value of my experience. That resolve lasted exactly 1 week. Kevin's first official day as CEO began with an all-hands meeting where he unveiled his strategic vision for Wilson Plumbing Services 2.0. The company logo I had helped design 10 years earlier was replaced with a sleek, corporate-looking emblem that could have belonged to any generic business. Our navy blue and silver color scheme was discarded in favor of what Kevin called contemporary teal and charcoal. This rebranding represents our evolution from a traditional plumbing service to an integrated home system solution provider, Kevin explained, using the laser pointer to highlight elements of his presentation. No one, including me, knew what an integrated home system solution provider actually meant in practical terms, but it soon became clear that Kevin viewed traditional plumbing work as merely a starting point for a much broader business model that would include home renovation, appliance sales, and even interior design services, none of which we had. Expertise. As the meeting concluded, Kevin handed out new organizational charts. I scanned the document for my name, eventually finding it 3 levels below. Kevin reporting to a regional operations director position that was currently marked to be filled. "You're demoting me," I asked Kevin privately after the meeting. "Not demoting, restructuring," he corrected. "We need a more sophisticated management hierarchy. I'm bringing in Michael Porter from my business program to oversee operations. He has an MBA with a specialization in organizational efficiency." "And what does Michael know about plumbing?" Kevin sighed as if explaining something to a child. "He doesn't need to know plumbing. He knows management. The technical stuff is your department. My department that now reports to someone with 0 industry experience." "This is exactly the problem, Marcus," Kevin said, his tone condescending. "You're stuck in an outdated mindset where technical knowledge is the only thing that matters. Modern businesses separate technical execution from strategic management." I walked away before saying something I would regret, but the message was clear in Kevin's vision. My 15 years of building this company meant nothing compared to his and his business school friends' theoretical knowledge. I was no longer Marcus Wilson, the dedicated professional who had helped build Wilson Plumbing Services into a respected local business. I was just another employee, an outdated relic of the old way of doing things. And my father had made this possible. He had handed the keys to my professional future to someone who saw my life's work as simply the technical stuff. The organizational changes Kevin implemented were just the beginning. Within a month, the company I had helped build for 15 years became almost unrecognizable. The family atmosphere that had defined Wilson Plumbing was replaced by corporate policies straight from Kevin's business textbooks. Michael Porter, Kevin's business school friend with the MBA, started the following Monday. His first act as regional operations director was to implement a strict hierarchy for all communication. Field technicians, many of whom had been with the company for years and were used to calling me directly with questions, were now required to log issues through a complicated ticketing system that often delayed solutions to urgent problems. "We need documentation and accountability," Michael explained when I raised concerns. "Your informal approach may have worked for a small operation, but we're positioning for growth." The growth they envisioned seemed increasingly disconnected from reality. Kevin hired a marketing firm that charged thousands of dollars to create advertisements, showcasing services we didn't actually offer. When I pointed this out, Kevin dismissed my concerns. "We're selling the aspiration, not just the service," he explained. "Basic plumbing isn't sexy. We need to elevate our brand perception." Meanwhile, real problems were mounting. The new pricing structure was driving away loyal customers. The Westside Hospital, a client I had personally secured 5 years earlier, called to discuss their concerns about recent service. "Marcus, we value our relationship with you," said Janet, the facilities manager. "But these new rates are 30% higher than our contract specifies, and your team missed 2 scheduled maintenance visits last month." I promised to resolve the issue immediately, only to discover that Kevin had deliberately increased their rates outside the contract terms, calling it strategic client repricing. "They're a captive client," he explained when I confronted him. "Where else are they going to go for emergency service? They'll adjust to the new market reality." "They're going to leave," I warned, "and they'll take their 3 properties with them." Kevin shrugged. "Then we'll replace them with more profitable clients." But the new clients weren't materializing despite the expensive marketing campaign. Instead, our calendar showed increasing gaps as longtime customers took their business elsewhere. Our experienced technicians were growing frustrated with the new procedures that prioritized upselling over quality service. I tried one last time to reason with my father, catching him alone at the office early one morning before Kevin arrived. "Dad, you need to look at these numbers," I said, showing him our monthly revenue reports. "We're down 22% compared to last year. The new direction isn't working." Dad frowned at the papers. "Every business has adjustment periods. Kevin says this is normal during a strategic pivot." Kevin says a lot of things, but the reality is, we're losing customers faster than we're gaining them. The Westside Hospital account is on the verge of leaving. Kevin mentioned they were being difficult about the necessary rate adjustments, Dad replied. "Sometimes you have to be willing to lose clients who don't value premium service." "Premium service?" "Dad, we missed their scheduled maintenance because Kevin reassigned the technicians to a photo shoot for the new brochures. That's not premium service. That's mismanagement." Dad's expression hardened. "I think you're letting your personal feelings cloud your judgment, Marcus. Kevin has a vision for this company that goes beyond just fixing pipes. I need you to either get on board or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. After 15 years of dedicated service, I was expendable if I didn't embrace Kevin's vision. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. A major water main break at the Greenfield Commercial Complex required immediate attention. As the most experienced plumber in the company, I took charge of the situation, working through the night with 2 of our senior technicians to prevent extensive water damage and restore service. The client was impressed with our quick response and professional handling of the crisis. The property manager, Scott Reynolds, called Kevin directly to commend our work. The following day, Kevin called a special meeting to announce that his team had successfully resolved the Greenfield emergency, positioning us for an expanded contract with their parent company. There was no mention of my role or the fact that I had coordinated the entire operation while he slept comfortably at home. When I approached him privately afterward, his response was telling. "The client doesn't need to know who did what," Kevin said dismissively. "They just need to know the company delivered. And as CEO, I represent the company." I realized then that nothing would change. Kevin would continue to take credit for the successes built on my expertise, while implementing changes that undermined the very foundation of our business. And Dad would continue to support him, blinded by his belief that Kevin's degree somehow qualified him to lead better than my 15 years of proven results. That evening, I drafted my resignation letter. It was brief and professional, giving the standard 2 weeks' notice. I didn't enumerate my grievances or Kevin's failings. What would be the point? Dad had made his choice clear, and no amount of evidence would change his mind now. I delivered the letter to Dad's office the next morning. He read it twice, his expression shifting from surprise to disappointment. "You're really quitting, after all these years?" "I'm moving on," I corrected. "The company is heading in a direction that doesn't align with my values or expertise. This is about Kevin, isn't it? You can't accept working under your brother. This is about respecting 15 years of my professional life," I replied evenly. "Something this company no longer does." Dad sighed heavily. "What will you do?" "I'll figure it out," I said, though I already had plans forming. "I have savings and skills." Dad called Kevin into the office, then handing him my resignation letter without comment. Kevin scanned it quickly, his expression a mixture of surprise and what looked suspiciously like relief. "This is unfortunate timing with our expansion plans," he said, as if reading from a script. "But we can adapt. The organizational structure I've implemented can absorb this kind of personnel change." Personnel change. 15 years reduced to a casual corporate euphemism. "I'll work with Michael to redistribute your responsibilities," Kevin continued. "We've been planning to bring in someone with updated technical certifications anyway." And there it was, the final dismissal of everything I had contributed. My experience wasn't just undervalued. It was considered outdated, something to be replaced rather than respected. I completed my 2 weeks notice period, professionally documenting procedures and training others where possible. Most of the staff could sense something was wrong, but I kept the details private. This was between me, Kevin, and Dad. On my final day, there was no farewell gathering, no acknowledgement of my years of service. Kevin was in meetings with potential investors, showcasing plans for expansion that would likely never materialize. Dad stopped by, briefly awkwardly wishing me well before retreating to his office. As I packed the few personal items from my desk, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. I was leaving behind a significant chapter of my life, but also stepping away from an increasingly toxic situation that devalued everything I had worked for. Walking to my truck with a small box of belongings, I took one last look at the Wilson Plumbing Services building. The new sign with Kevin's redesigned logo gleamed in the afternoon sun. It looked impressive, professional, corporate. It looked nothing like the family business I had helped build for 15 years. It was time to start something new. The first week after leaving Wilson Plumbing was disorienting. For 15 years, my routine had been dictated by the needs of the business emergency calls scheduled service team management. Suddenly, my time was my own, and the responsibility for what came next rested entirely on my shoulders. I had been prudent with my finances over the years, living below my means and building a substantial savings account. This gave me breathing room to plan my next steps carefully, rather than rushing into a decision out of financial necessity. The answer came to me during a conversation with Tom Barnes, one of the senior technicians who called to check on me after my departure. "The place isn't the same without you, Marcus," Tom said. "Kevin's got us filling out paperwork for every wrench we use. Michael's talking about optimizing service delivery windows while we're losing customers left and right." "How bad is it?" I asked, genuinely curious about the aftermath of my departure. "Remember the Westside Hospital account you warned them about? They left last week. Said they couldn't deal with the new management. 3 other commercial clients followed them out the door." I felt no satisfaction hearing this news, only sadness for the business my father had built and I had helped grow. "What will you do now?" Tom asked. The question had been circling my mind for days, and suddenly the answer seemed obvious. "I'm going to start my own plumbing business," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words. "Focus on quality service, fair pricing, and actually fixing people's problems." There was a pause on the line before Tom responded. "If you're serious, I want in. And I'm not the only one." By the end of the week, I had filed the paperwork to establish Wilson Quality Plumbing, a name that honored my family's tradition of service while establishing my independence. I used my savings to purchase a reliable used service truck and essential equipment. My home garage became our temporary headquarters with a small desk set up for administrative work. Tom was true to his word, giving notice at my father's company to join me. Within 2 weeks, 2 more experienced technicians followed suit. These were skilled professionals who valued the work culture I had fostered and were disillusioned by the changes Kevin had implemented. "Kevin said good riddance when I left," reported Jim Reynolds, a master plumber with 12 years of experience. "Said we were resistant to progress, and he could replace us with more forward-thinking talent. Then he hired 2 kids straight out of technical school who don't know a pipe wrench from a monkey wrench." I was determined not to define my new business in opposition to my father's company. This wasn't about revenge or competition. It was about creating something that reflected my values and utilized my experience. "We focus on doing quality work at fair prices," I told my small team during our first official meeting in my garage. "No upselling, no fancy packages, just honest service. We show up when we say we will. We fix the problem right the first time. And we treat customers with respect." I created a simple website that emphasized our experience and commitment to quality. Rather than stock photos and flashy graphics, I included actual pictures of our team and genuine testimonials from clients who had followed us from Wilson Plumbing. The first calls started coming in almost immediately. Many were from former customers who had tracked me down through word of mouth. "Marcus, it's Patricia Collins," said one of our first callers. "My kitchen sink is backed up again, and when I called Wilson Plumbing, they tried to sell me some premium maintenance package I don't need. Can you help?" We helped Patricia and dozens of other longtime customers who sought us out. Each successful job led to referrals, and our schedule began filling up. Without the overhead costs of a fancy office or marketing campaign, we could offer competitive rates while still making a healthy profit. I made it a point to be in the field regularly, working alongside my team rather than managing from a distance. This kept me connected to the actual work and the customers we served. It also allowed me to continue training my technicians, passing along the knowledge and problem-solving approaches I had developed over 15 years. 6 months after starting Wilson Quality Plumbing, we had grown from 1 truck to 4. Our reputation for reliability and fair pricing had spread throughout the community. We moved operations from my garage to a modest commercial space that provided room for inventory and a small office. One of our most significant early wins came when Scott Reynolds from the Greenfield Commercial Complex contacted me directly. "Marcus, we've had nothing but problems since you left Wilson Plumbing," Scott explained. "They missed 2 scheduled maintenance visits, and when they did show up, it was some kid who spent more time trying to sell us a service contract than fixing the actual issue." Scott offered us the maintenance contract for all 3 of their commercial properties, a substantial piece of business that required hiring 2 additional technicians to manage the workload. I was careful about our growth, prioritizing quality over expansion. Each new hire was selected not just for technical skills but for their customer service approach and work ethic. I implemented a profit-sharing model that gave everyone a stake in our success, creating a team that was invested in delivering excellent service. The contrast between my business approach and Kevin's became increasingly apparent. While Wilson Quality Plumbing built a reputation for reliability and transparency, Wilson Plumbing Services became known for high prices, aggressive upselling, and inconsistent service quality. I heard through the grapevine that Kevin had implemented a commission structure that incentivized technicians to sell unnecessary services rather than focusing on solving the customer's immediate problem. This might have boosted short-term revenue, but damaged long-term customer relationships. Relationships I had spent years building. 1 year after starting my company, we had established ourselves as a respected competitor in the local market. Our client list included both residential customers and commercial accounts, including several that had previously been with my father's business. I took no pleasure in winning business away from Wilson Plumbing Services. These were relationships I had nurtured over years, and in an ideal world they would have remained with the company where I had invested so much of my professional life. But Kevin's approach had driven them away, and I was simply providing the quality service they had come to expect. The success of Wilson Quality Plumbing wasn't just financial. I had created a workplace where skilled tradespeople were respected for their knowledge and experience. Our technicians weren't treated as interchangeable parts in a corporate machine, but as valued professionals whose expertise directly contributed to our reputation. I rediscovered my passion for the work itself. The satisfaction of solving complex problems, the gratitude of customers whose lives were made better by our service, the pride in building something valuable. The betrayal I had felt when Dad chose Kevin over me gradually faded, replaced by the knowledge that I was succeeding on my own terms. That success didn't go unnoticed in the community. Local business publications featured Wilson Quality Plumbing in articles about successful startups. The Chamber of Commerce invited me to speak about entrepreneurship at their quarterly meeting. Former colleagues reached out to congratulate me or inquire about employment opportunities. Through it all, I maintained a professional silence about my departure from Wilson Plumbing Services. When customers asked, I simply explained that I had decided to start my own company to focus on quality service. I never disparaged my father or brother, even when customers shared negative experiences with their new management. This wasn't just taking the high road. It was good business. I wanted Wilson Quality Plumbing to succeed, based on our merits, not as a reaction against my former company. We were building something positive, not tearing something down. But the past has a way of circling back, and I knew a confrontation with my family was inevitable. I just didn't expect it to come quite so soon, or under such desperate circumstances. 13 months after launching Wilson Quality Plumbing, I ran into Greg Hoffman, the accountant who had handled the books for my father's business since I was a teenager. We crossed paths at a local coffee shop, and his expression upon seeing me was a mixture of surprise and what looked surprisingly like relief. "Marcus," he said, approaching my table. "I've been meaning to call you. How's the new business going?" "Better than I expected," I replied honestly. "We're growing steadily, focusing on quality over quantity." Greg nodded, glancing around before lowering his voice. "That's good to hear. I wish I could say the same about your father's company." This was the first direct news I'd had about Wilson Plumbing Services in months. I'd deliberately avoided asking mutual acquaintances, not wanting to appear fixated on my past. "Things aren't going well?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Greg sighed heavily. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but they're in serious trouble. Revenue is down almost 40% compared to when you were there. They've lost most of their major commercial accounts. Kevin's marketing campaigns have cost a fortune with minimal return." I felt a complicated mix of emotions: concern for my father, vindication that my warnings had been correct, worry for the employees who remained. "Does Dad realize how bad it is?" "I think he's beginning to," Greg replied. "But Kevin keeps insisting it's just market fluctuations and the investment phase of his grand strategy. Meanwhile, they're burning through the company's reserves at an alarming rate." And Michael Porter, the MBA, who was going to revolutionize operations, Greg snorted. Left 3 months ago for a corporate position in the city. Apparently plumbing wasn't aligned with his career trajectory. I thanked Greg for the information and changed the subject, uncomfortable with discussing my family's business troubles. But his words stayed with me in the following days, prompting unwelcome concerns about my father's retirement security and the livelihood of employees who had been like extended family. 2 weeks later, I attended my nephew's birthday party, my sister's son, neutral territory in the family divide that had formed since my departure. Dad was there, looking noticeably older and more tired than when I had last seen him. Kevin was conspicuously absent. Throughout the celebration, Dad and I maintained a polite distance, exchanging pleasantries but avoiding any substantial conversation. It wasn't until the party was winding down that Mom orchestrated a moment for us to speak privately, directing us both to help bring chairs in from the backyard. "How's business?" Dad asked awkwardly as we folded chairs. "Good," I replied. "Steady growth, good team." Dad nodded. "That's good. I always knew you had it in you to run your own operation." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me, but I let it pass without comment. "And how's retirement treating you?" I asked instead. A shadow crossed his face. "Well, not quite as planned. I've been going into the office most days. Kevin needs some guidance with certain aspects of the business." This was the closest he would come to admitting there were problems. Pride had always been my father's defining characteristic, pride in his work, pride in his business, and now pride that prevented him from acknowledging his mistake in choosing Kevin to lead. "If there's ever anything I can do to help," I offered vaguely, not quite sure what I was proposing. Dad looked at me for a long moment, something unspoken in his eyes. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "More than you know." The conversation ended there, but 3 days later my phone rang with Dad's number on the caller ID. It was the first time he had called since I left the company. "Marcus," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I was wondering if you might have time for coffee tomorrow. There's something I'd like to discuss." We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our homes. I arrived to find Dad already seated, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him, his expression troubled. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "I know things have been difficult between us." I nodded but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "The business is in trouble, Marcus," he admitted finally. "Serious trouble. We've lost most of our major accounts. The new customers Kevin promised haven't materialized. We're operating in the red each month." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it sincerely. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in the company's decline. Kevin's ideas looked good on paper. Dad continued staring into his coffee. All those strategies and projections, but somehow they never translated to actual results. "And now," he trailed off, shaking his head. "And now," I prompted. "We're 3 months away from bankruptcy unless something changes dramatically." Dad said the words clearly painful for him to speak. Everything I built over 35 years gone. I felt a surge of empathy for my father despite our past conflicts. This business had been his life's work, his legacy. Watching it crumble must be devastating. "What about Kevin? What does he say?" Dad's expression hardened slightly. "Kevin believes we just need another round of rebranding and marketing. He wants to take out a second mortgage on the building to fund it." "And you don't agree?" "I can't risk losing everything on another expensive campaign that might not work," Dad said. "Besides, I'm not sure marketing is the real problem." There was a long silence between us. I knew what he was asking without him having to say the words directly. He wanted my help, my expertise, my customer relationships, perhaps even my successful business to save what remained of Wilson Plumbing Services. "Dad," I began carefully, "what exactly are you asking me?" He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "I was wrong, Marcus. I should have recognized the value of your experience and dedication. I got caught up in the idea that Kevin's degree somehow made him better qualified, when the reality was that you were the heart of that company for years." The acknowledgement I had wanted for so long finally came, but it felt hollow under these circumstances. This wasn't a genuine recognition of my worth. It was a desperate move driven by financial necessity. "I'm asking if you would consider coming back," Dad continued. Maybe even merging your company with what's left of ours. Your customer base combined with our infrastructure could save the business. Before I could respond, the cafe door opened, and Kevin walked in, his expression thunderous. He spotted us immediately and strode to our table. So this is what you're doing, he demanded of Dad. Going behind my back to beg Marcus for help. I told you I have a plan to turn things around. Kevin, Dad said wearily, your plans haven't worked so far. We need to consider all options. We don't need his help, Kevin insisted, gesturing toward me without making eye contact. We just need to stay the course with the strategy I've developed. The strategy that's run the company into the ground, I asked quietly. Kevin finally looked at me, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You've just been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting for us to fail, so you could swoop in and play the hero. I've been building my own successful business. I corrected him. I have no interest in seeing Dad's company fail. Then prove it, Kevin challenged. Come back and fix what you claim I've broken. The request was breathtaking in its audacity, asking me to abandon the company I had built from scratch to rescue the one that had devalued and discarded me. It's not that simple, I replied, keeping my tone measured. I have employees who depend on me now, clients who trust Wilson Quality Plumbing. So that's a no, Kevin said, his tone bitter. All your talk about caring about the family business was just talk. I looked between my brother and my father, seeing the desperation in both their expressions, though manifested differently, Dad's quiet resignation, Kevin's defensive anger. I need to think about this, I said, finally standing up from the table. This isn't a decision I can make on the spot. As I left the cafe, I felt the weight of their expectations and the complexity of the situation. What had started as a simple case of professional betrayal had evolved into something far more complicated. A question of family loyalty versus personal integrity, of helping those who had hurt me versus protecting what I had built for myself. There were no easy answers, and whatever decision I made would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. For 3 days, I wrestled with my father's request. I reviewed financial scenarios, considered the impact on my employees, and examined my own conflicted feelings. I consulted with Tom and my other senior staff, wanting their input before making any decision that would affect their livelihoods. Whatever you decide, we're with you, Tom assured me. But don't sacrifice what we've built here out of guilt or family pressure. His words crystallized something important. Wilson Quality Plumbing wasn't just my company. It belonged to everyone who had taken a chance on joining me. They had left secure jobs, believing in my vision and values. I owed them my loyalty as much as I had ever owed it to my father. On the 4th day, I called my father and arranged to meet at his office. I deliberately chose this location, the place where my professional journey had both flourished and ended, for what needed to be said. Dad was alone when I arrived, sitting behind the desk where he had made the decision to hand the company to Kevin rather than me. The office looked different now. The expensive furniture Kevin had ordered seemed out of place amid the increasingly shabby surroundings. The framed business degree still hung prominently on the wall, though the glass now had a visible crack in one corner. I've given your request a lot of thought, I began, after declining his offer of coffee. And I want to be clear about what I can and cannot do. Dad nodded, his expression guarded but hopeful. I will not merge my company with Wilson Plumbing Services, I stated firmly. The business I've built operates on different principles and values than what this company has become. Combining them would undermine everything my team and I have worked to establish. Dad's shoulders slumped slightly, but I continued before he could respond. However, I'm willing to offer professional courtesy in the form of referrals for jobs that we're too busy to handle or that fall outside our current service area. I can also recommend some straightforward changes that might help stabilize your customer base. That's not what I was hoping for, Dad admitted. I know, I acknowledged. But it's what I can offer while maintaining my integrity and protecting the interests of my employees and customers. The door opened then, and Kevin entered. He had clearly been waiting nearby, perhaps listening to our conversation. His usual confident demeanor was noticeably diminished, replaced by a defensive posture that spoke volumes about the company's current state. So you're refusing to help, Kevin accused, though with less conviction than during our cafe confrontation. I'm establishing boundaries, I corrected him. Something I should have done years ago. We're family, Kevin protested. Doesn't that count for anything? Family works both ways, I replied evenly. When you took over this company, you discarded 15 years of my contributions because they didn't come with a fancy degree. You treated me as just another employee rather than someone who helped build this business. Those actions had consequences. Kevin started to respond, but Dad raised a hand to stop him. He's right, Kevin. We didn't value Marcus's experience and knowledge. We were so focused on credentials and modern business theories that we lost sight of what actually made this company successful. It was the most direct acknowledgement of their mistake I had heard, and it clearly cost Dad something to say it in front of Kevin. The situation is what it is, I continued. You made choices for your business, and I made choices for mine. Now we both have to live with the results of those decisions. So that's it, Kevin asked. You're just going to let Dad's legacy fail. This company is still salvageable, I replied. But not through a merger or bailout. It needs to return to the fundamentals: quality service, fair pricing, and actually listening to customers instead of trying to sell them things they don't need. I outlined some basic recommendations: scale back to core plumbing services, reduce unnecessary overhead, rebuild relationships with former customers through transparent pricing and reliable service. Nothing revolutionary, just the solid business practices I had advocated for before leaving. These changes won't produce overnight success, I concluded, but they might stop the bleeding and give you a foundation to rebuild. Dad listened attentively, occasionally nodding. Kevin remained silent, his expression a mixture of resentment and reluctant acknowledgement. One more thing, I added. If any of your current employees want to apply for positions with my company, I'll consider them based on their qualifications and attitude, not their history with Wilson Plumbing. Good plumbers deserve good employment regardless of past affiliations. This was both a genuine offer and a subtle message. I would not poach their remaining staff, but I wouldn't turn away qualified professionals seeking a more stable environment. As I prepared to leave, Dad walked me to the door. In the hallway away from Kevin's hearing, he spoke in a low voice. I'm proud of you, Marcus. Not just for your success, but for standing your ground. I should have seen your value sooner. The words I had longed to hear for years finally came, not when I was seeking his approval, but when I had found my own path and confidence. Thank you, I replied simply. I hope things work out here. I mean that sincerely. In the months that followed, Wilson Plumbing Services underwent significant changes. They downsized to a smaller office, refocused on core services, and gradually began rebuilding their customer base. They wouldn't recapture their former market position. Too many clients had established relationships with Wilson Quality Plumbing or other competitors, but they stabilized enough to remain viable. Kevin, faced with the reality of his failures, stepped back from day-to-day management, focusing instead on the financial aspects where his education was actually relevant. Dad came out of retirement to oversee operations, temporarily implementing many of the changes I had suggested. Our companies maintained a professional distance, occasionally referring clients to each other when appropriate. We weren't partners, but we weren't enemies either. Meanwhile, Wilson Quality Plumbing continued to thrive. We expanded to 10 service vehicles, moved to a larger facility, and established a training program for apprentice plumbers. I implemented a partial employee ownership plan, giving my core team stakes in the business they had helped build. The experience taught me valuable lessons about self-worth recognition and defining success on my own terms. For years, I had measured my value through my father's eyes, seeking approval and acknowledgement that never fully came. The betrayal of being passed over for leadership forced me to recognize that external validation, even from those closest to us, cannot define our worth. True validation comes from within, from knowing your own value and creating circumstances that reflect it. Sometimes the greatest opportunities emerge from the deepest disappointments if we have the courage to forge our own path rather than cling to situations that no longer serve us. I no longer harbor resentment toward my father or brother. Their choices, however misguided, ultimately led me to build something that better reflected my values and vision. In a strange way, I owe my current success to their failure to recognize what I could offer. About 6 months after our office meeting, Dad visited my company headquarters unannounced. He toured the facility, meeting my team and observing our operations with genuine interest. Before leaving, he paused in the lobby, looking at the Wilson Quality Plumbing logo on the wall. "You've built something special here," he said quietly. "Something more aligned with the original spirit of my company than what remains of it now." It was the closest thing to a complete acknowledgement of his mistake that I would ever receive, and it was enough. In the end, I found freedom in releasing the need for validation from those who couldn't or wouldn't provide it. I discovered that true success isn't measured by titles or who approves of your path, but by creating work that reflects your values and surrounding yourself with people who recognize your worth. If you're facing a similar situation, overlooked, undervalued, or betrayed by those who should recognize your contributions, remember that sometimes the greatest gift is being forced to prove your worth on your own terms. The path may be difficult, but the destination can be far more rewarding than the one that was denied to you. Have you ever had to walk away from something you helped build? How did you handle that transition? And what did you learn from it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the door closing behind you leads to better opportunities ahead. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it, but by your own knowledge of what you bring to the table.